Hi, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of the Iron and Intention podcast. I'm your host, Tommy, and today we're talking with a very special guest who I admire a ton. I want to pose this question. What happens when your entire life changes in a matter of seconds? What happens when the career you built your identity around is suddenly over? What happens when your body changes, your abilities change, your relationships change, and you figure out, what do I do next? Who am I now? And perhaps the hardest question of all, what do you do next? Today on Iron Intention, we're talking about resilience. We're not talking about that kind of resilience that sounds good on a motivational poster. We're talking about the kind of resilience that's real, the kind that gets tested when life doesn't go according to plans. We're talking about identity, trauma, recovery, purpose, community, asking for help, and learning to build a life intentionally after circumstances have forced you to change and rebuild your entire life. Our guest today knows that journey personally. Jay Fain is a United States Army veteran and a former infantryman who served in Iraq. In 2007, his convoy was attacked, leaving him with devastating injuries and ultimately the loss of his leg. But Jay's story isn't simply about the day he was wounded. It's about everything that happened afterward. It's about learning how to live again. It's about figuring out who you are when the identity you once had is no longer completely fitting. It's about discovering that strength isn't always about doing everything yourself. It's about taking those experiences that could have broken you and finding a way to use them to help you and to help others. Jay, welcome to Iron and Intention.
Hey, Tommy. Thanks for having me.
Jay, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your background, who you are, and kind of what led you here?
Well, me and my background, you kind of covered it pretty well there in the intro. Just Army veteran, where I don't even know where to start, honestly, Tommy. It's just because my life, is just kind of a bit different from most people, I guess, just because of the military. My father being in the military and growing up, moving around my whole life. So it's almost a hard question to answer at times, if that makes sense. But who I am now is, so I'm in my early 40s now, living here in Missouri, medically retired from the military. I do a little bit of veteran advocacy work to try to help veterans and veteran issues and veteran topics and veteran benefits get heard and seen. I retired from the military, but also retired from nonprofit work, really. But I still sit on a few boards, nonprofit boards and stuff, and still really do a lot of that type of stuff now. But really more so now, just I serve like my family now. Whatever my family needs and do things for them. Really is mostly what takes up my time nowadays.
Well, I will tell our audience that I met Jay several years ago when I was a police chief, and I will tell you, Jay's being very modest. Jay has taken his story on the road to motivate and serve others. Jay and his wife, Kayla, were the 2025 Pleasant Hill Citizens of the Year. A lot of that had to do with they're usually a group package, but their service to others in the community, including that veterans community. Jay serves on lots of nonprofit boards. He and Kayla are both super involved. So Jay, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. You've been a true inspiration for me and for Iron and Intention. And so let's get into this. So let's talk about who Jay was before you joined the Army.
Okay. Before the Army, I was what they call an Army brat. So my dad did a career in the Army for 36 years, and we moved around my whole life. It was just me, my dad, my mother, and my sister. It was a lot of traveling. That's all I remember, a lot. Moving to different places, different countries, different towns, kind of starting over. And really that was about it before I joined the military. That was really my life, just traveling and moving to different places and still trying to figure out what to do. But yeah, that's really
so when you joined the Army, probably your dad probably had a big influence on your life and your decision to join it. It was kind of a family tradition for you, I guess. What did it mean for you to join the Army and become an infantryman? What did it mean to you at that point in your life?
Well, I always knew I was going to serve. if there's one thing for certain growing up from a young kid and growing into a young lad before I joined the military, I always knew I was going to be in the military in some way, shape, or form. There's no doubt about that in my mind at that time. And it was, I mean, there's quite a few reasons why obviously my father and his father and a lot of the men in the family were service members, and 9/11 happened when I was in high school. I saw it happen on the news, and I was a junior in high school when all that stuff was happening. And a lot of my friends that I graduated with, close friends, joined the military and went off and deployed and all that stuff. But I didn't join right after high school. There's all those reasons why what led me to join, but really the one that really made me take that leap of faith to make it happen was one of my best friends I was in high school with. He got killed in Iraq in 2005, and I was living in South Carolina at the time and doing the college thing. And I remember I got the phone call right before my classes started and went to his funeral and all that stuff. And then I had told my father. Then I was like, he was still active duty at the time. I was like, Dad, I'm just going to join. I can't. I really, at that time, I was about a year and a half, 2 years into college, and I didn't feel like I was in the right place. I just felt like I just didn't feel right. But when that happened, I joined, and I knew that's what I needed to do at that time.
So how much of your identity at that point in your life, Jay, had become connected to being a soldier?
Before becoming a soldier is what you're asking?
No, after you became a soldier, how much of your identity was connected to that? I can speak for me. My identity has really been driven around my career in law enforcement. And so how was that for you? Was it a similar situation?
Yeah, absolutely. Like after getting through basic and all that stuff and getting to my unit and deploying, and I felt like I was where I exactly needed to be. It's what I've always wanted to do, and I just felt very comfortable where I was at, and it was so much part of my identity because of the background of how I grew up that it was who I was at the time. And then anyone who really joins the military or law enforcement and all that, doing those types of jobs, service to others, it really does become so much part of you, or you really can't do the job correctly, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
But
so
yeah.
I don't necessarily want us to go into, we'll go into as much detail as you want, but can you tell me about the day that everything changed for you, the day of your injury?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it was 11 months into my deployment. We're in Baghdad mainly. I was actually slated to come back home for my 2-week R&R period, and we're living on an outpost in the middle of the city of Baghdad at the time. And it was just like any other hot summer day in Baghdad, nothing different. But the only thing different for me was I was actually coming home for a little bit. And how all that logistics works is we had to get from our outpost to where our battalion headquarters was at, and then they outprocessed us to send us home for a couple weeks. And I wasn't with my guys I was with at the time. I had to get a ride from another platoon to get to where I was at, where I needed to go. But leaving the outpost and going down a route that we've been down hundreds, thousands of times already before, not unfamiliar territory. And then I was in a 4-vehicle Humvee convoy. I was in the last Humvee, and I was sitting behind the passenger, behind the TC, the truck commander. And I remember I was sitting there, and then, I have all this gear on, and there's not a lot of room in those things with all the gear and all the radios and ammo and all this thing. So I have all my gear on, have my gun between my legs, pointed to the ground, holding it up like this, and just kind of leaning my head up against the window, looking outside, and, dazing in and out of sleep probably. And then the next thing you know, it's almost like, I always explain it like I woke up into a dream. It's like I woke up into something different. I didn't realize what happened at first. It's because the bomb that hit my vehicle directly blew up right outside of where I was sitting, and it was a directional type bomb, and it came up through the door and through the vehicle exactly where I was sitting, right on the outside of it. So when I actually kind of came to and realized that we hit an IED, a roadside bomb. That's when I started doing what I remember, like checking on everyone else in the vehicle or I remember I was trying to find my weapon. I was trying to figure out what was going on. And then I remember looking over to my left and I saw the guy sitting to my left. He was fine because he was checking the gunner that was sitting in the turret in between us. And I wasn't, at that time, the gunner was slouched over and I wasn't sure if he got killed or if he was knocked out. And then the driver and the truck commander in front of me was fine because the truck commander was yelling at the driver to just, hey, keep moving, get out of the kill zone or whatever, just get out of here. And then I remember nothing after that. Everything just went blank. Then I was told that when all that happened was the truck commander got a status check, but when he was trying to get like a ready up or am I good to go from behind him, he just heard like this blood curdling scream and then silence. He knew something was terribly wrong or something terribly wrong happened to me. And when they were into a safer spot, he got out of the vehicle and tried to open the door where I was at. And I can't remember if I said I couldn't find my gun. After when I came to, I couldn't open the door where I was sitting at. I remember those two things because initial reaction when something like that happens, you want to get ready to possibly fight. But when he couldn't open the door because it was destroyed by the bomb so bad, and then the gun was destroyed because the bomb that went through the door ripped up through my leg and through my body and destroyed the weapon that was sitting between my legs. So that's why I couldn't find that stuff. And so they had to pull me out the other side of the Humvee, get me onto the ground. What I was told is that I was just kind of in and out. He was kind of just hitting me, smacking me to keep me like awake or whatever. I don't remember any of this stuff. The medic had come over and they were trying to pack the wound to stop the bleeding. And I was on fire, so I had, put the fire out on me and all that. And they couldn't put a tourniquet on because the wound was so high. So what they did is what the medic did. This is what saved my life right there on the street. He literally dug inside my body because my femoral had severed where the bomb blew and I was just bleeding badly. And he had found the femoral that had retracted up into my body and he pulled it out and he clamped it, And I kind of like equate it to like, do you remember that scene? You've seen Black Hawk Down? Mm-hmm. Remember that scene where they were trying to do the same thing for that guy? He's like, if I don't get this femoral, this guy's going to die right here. So pretty much what that medic did is exactly what the medic did for me, but he found the femoral and was able to clamp it and stop that heavy bleed enough to stabilize me, enough to like get me into another vehicle and get me into the nearest aid station. If he wasn't able to do that right there on the street that day, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you, Tommy. But I really wasn't completely out of the woods yet. Got me to the aid station, and the team there on hand said they're calling where the combat support hospital was nearby and saying, hey, you guys need to send a crew out here to get him. He needs to be in surgery right away. We're having trouble to keep him stabilized. He's still like dying on me because I was internally bleeding so bad. And the PA lady said that I was actually kind of responding because I was in so much pain. And the Black Hawk crew came out to get me somewhat against their rules because the weather status was red, so they're not supposed to fly or something like that. And when they do fly, they're supposed to fly with a wingman. But they knew that I was out there and someone didn't come get me, I would die. They left Lone Ranger by themselves and came and got me anyways and got me back to the Baghdad Combat Support Hospital, which wasn't really that far from where I got blown up. Got me to the hospital, got me straight to the OR, and that's when they did all the things, all their miracle work, whatever they do. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know, But one of the pretty cool things about this story is that my father was in Baghdad at the time when this happened. So when I actually finally woke up and came to, I remember seeing my father on my bedside because he was working over there as a contractor at the time. He had just retired from the army and got to Baghdad, and we were only a few miles apart from where my outpost was at and where he was at. But I remember waking up and I saw him, and he told me that I just remember tubes and things and kind of just foggy because I was probably like drugged up so bad on their pain meds and stuff. And he told me that's when he broke the news to me that they had to cut off my leg. And then I remember looking up under the blanket and I saw that there was only one leg there. Well, I saw all these tubes and stuff. I saw like just all this stuff on me, but I looked up and I saw there wasn't a leg there. To me, it felt like there still was a leg there, but it wasn't. When I looked, I was like, oh, wow, there really isn't a leg there. But I didn't process that completely at that moment. So I remember one of the first things I asked him, because I was like, how's everyone else? Did anyone else get hurt out there that day? When that happened? And he told me that everyone was fine. And then I'd found out later on that gunner that was slouched over was literally, he was just knocked unconscious really bad. And everyone else was fine and no one got really any major injuries. I was the only one that got really, that suffered any devastating injury.
So Jay, was there ever a moment where you thought, man, my old life is over. What am I going to do?
I mean, honestly, Tommy, there's been a lot of moments like that, but I remember like one of the initial first times like that was the thing was when I first, because after all that stuff in Baghdad, I got flown to San Antonio, Texas, to Brooke Army Medical Center, to the burn unit there, and did all my therapies and recoveries and surgeries and all that stuff. And I was only an inpatient in the hospital for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and then I was able to become outpatient with the help of my mother there. And we stayed at a guest house nearby, so I could start my outpatient appointments and therapies and all the things. But that's when it really hit me, when I was out of the hospital, staying in that guest house, like a hotel. And I remember just one night, like, it really hit me. It really hit me hard. It was just like, I was only 23 years old. I remember just like, wow, I only got one leg. What? I just remember just crying really bad one night. But that quickly became an afterthought because I just knew like, all right, talking to myself at that time, I was like, just got to figure this out, Jay. Like, this is your life now. And then, yeah, that was the first time it hit me really hard when I got out of the hospital.
Jay, we often celebrate people's physical recovery, and we see people that suffer catastrophic loss, such as yourself. We see your surgeries, we see the rehabilitation. I've got to witness you get a new leg and go through that process over the last couple of years, which has been really cool. And you've done really well at putting that information out there and being so grateful for the people that help you through all those things. What we don't always see is what's happening inside their head. So for somebody like me who has not suffered like this, and other people, our viewers and listeners that are watching or listening, what's the hardest part of recovery that people don't see?
I mean, when it comes to recovery, it's all encompassing, especially if you suffered something physically traumatic. You can heal and get good and be fine and all that, but in order to even get to that point, like it all starts in your head first. You just got to tell yourself, figure out ways to be like, all right, this is really not that bad. At least from my perspective. Yeah, I lost a leg, sure, but I was only 23. I was still healthy. I was still young. I still have decades of life ahead of me. Do I still really want to live in a somewhat of feeling sorry for myself type mindset? No, because I knew I had so much more ahead of me that if I started thinking that way initially, that I would really get nowhere in my recovery. And that's still how it is even now. It's been almost 20 years. It's been over 19 years now. And still, like, yeah, there's days or times where it's like, man, I don't want to do this. I don't feel like doing anything or whatever. I have those slumps, but it's not like I let that define who I am and what I'm going to do, because it's not just me, because especially where I'm at now, like I have a family, people that rely on me and I rely on them too. So it's not just about me. There's others out there that rely on me being present. And if I don't do that, how selfish of me to think that way and be that way.
I think this is where your story, your testimony, if you will, really connects with the mission of Iron and Intention. We talk a lot about transformation, but transformation isn't always something that we choose. Sometimes life just transforms us without asking for permission, just like in your situation. So the question that I want to ask is, how did losing your leg affect your identity, and how did you use your resilience to build a new one?
Well, I mean, just not knowing me, looking at me, like I went from 2 legs to having one, went from 2 legs to having one prosthetic leg and one real leg. And then I showcase that everywhere, every day. I show it loud and proud,
You do.
And how it affected my identity is like, I want people to see that there's what I want others to see. Like, I don't care if people look at me, stare at me, or whatever. It happens. Anyone that becomes disabled, especially with like a prosthetic, I get it. Even I do it as a person with a prosthesis. If I see someone else with a prosthetic, I'm like, wow, But it's an eye-opening thing for others out there that may have never seen anything like that, or maybe just kind of seen it on TV or something. Wow, there's the real thing right there. Like, there's more to this world. There's other people out there just still living their lives, and they're dealing with worse outcomes than myself. And how it changed my identity is just like, I know that with the things that I post or say or try to help with people with, like, it's given me an opportunity to give back to people that are maybe going through something similar. It's just like, hey, I get it, and showing them, hey, this is not the end. This is the beginning to something great if you want it to be. And I've had to learn that through just living my life, and learning that through experiences and stuff. And I'll get messages from people all the time saying, like, hey, I saw a post or you doing this, and that. It really changed my life, and thank you for what you do. And when I get those, I get so happy. Like, I don't know how to respond when I get those, like, but it just makes me happy that I actually helped somebody that I have no idea who they are, but I'm glad I did. That's how it's helped. I guess that's what this has done to help change my identity, because I couldn't imagine having 2 legs, what I'd be doing now, or what kind of person I would be.
So we hear the term mental toughness tossed around constantly, but you've experienced it in a way that most people never will. So for you, what does mental toughness actually mean to you today?
Mental toughness. Well, a lot of people, and I've made this mistake, they think tough is just like, you just gotta, especially if you're a guy, you gotta be a man. Yeah. Walk around with your chest out and, and be all alpha. And that's so wrong in so many ways. Mental toughness is not how tougher you are than that person you are working with or talking to or whatever it is. Mental toughness it's in your own mind, when you realize that the whole idea of being tough is not like, it's not to be the biggest, baddest, strongest person in the gym, or the richest, coolest, everyone knows me type person. To me, is like, okay, if you are a tough person, if you want to define it as tough, like, are you, like, I see it as like, what is your status in life now? Speaking for men, like, so you have a family, you have children, you have a wife, what are you doing for them? Are you being good for them? Because that's where you're at now. Your job is not who you are, your muscles are not who you are. Your being the coolest guy on the block is not who you are. Are you good with your family? And when I see people like that, that's tough, Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So is there a component to, obviously mental toughness, at least for me, means being able to push through things. But do you think, Jay, there's a component of mental toughness of asking for help when you need help?
Yes. I mean, if you are, because you can't do it all on your own, right? If you are struggling with whatever it is, asking for help is probably the toughest thing you can do. Because nothing wrong with asking for help when you need it. Because people think that, I'll just speak from experience when I was going through some things, and you were there for the beginning.
Yep.
You saw some of that stuff. At that time, I was very mad at the world. I wasn't mad at everyone, but I was mad at people, and I was uh, I thought I could do it all myself or with little to no help at all at that time. It just took me a while to get out of my own way to figure out, man, I really do need this. I really do need help. You know, I really need to look into myself and realize all these people that have been there or that were there are just there to help me. And all I have to do is just ask. And there's nothing wrong with doing that.
So,
No, I'm
what would
sorry.
you
Now,
say to a veteran who thinks asking for help means they're weak?
you know, I've experienced this with some people I've tried to help or have helped. And veteran to veteran, it's not saying it's easy to do, but it's pretty a little bit easier to do with another veteran. I can be almost very direct with that person. Like, nah, you're wrong. It is okay to tell someone going through something that bad to tell them that they are wrong. It's like, no, you're wrong. And you just remind them who they are, especially if you're a friend of theirs, someone that they trust, they love, or whatever. You just tell them, like, this is who you are, man. You need the help. We're here to help you. Just let us know what you need. If they think it's a weak thing, then it's okay to tell them, like, no, it's okay, you're wrong. But it's okay. But it's good to remind them that who they are, who they really are. You know, because when someone's in that point where they're just thinking they don't need the help, they tend to think everything is an attack on them. You know, so.
Yep.
And it's okay to reassure them that they are not being attacked, you know, that everyone's and I encourage anyone that is helping anyone in a situation like that, like, meet them where they're at, you know, and let them know that you're there to actually help them.
Awesome. So one of the things that I've kind of become interested in is the idea that sometimes healing doesn't happen because someone gives us that perfect advice. Sometimes we're able to heal just because your friend will sit next to you and say, I understand. Somebody will listen to you. So for you being really active in the veteran community, that support that you received from the veteran community, how beneficial was that for you in your recovery?
You know, when I was very much going through it bad, I am thankful that I went through something like that, honestly. I don't wish anyone to go through like a mental struggle like that ever in their lives. But it really opened my eyes and really made me very much more aware of who actually is there for you and who's not, you know. But the people that were there for me, at least during my experience, it makes me very much more grateful and thankful for those people in my life and in the veteran community, especially. And I'll be honest with you, Tommy, not all of them were there for me that I thought they were going to be. And I am thankful to know that now. You know, and it was kind of a self-reflecting and a lesson learned on my part. Like, wow, not everyone's actually there for you, Jay, no matter how much you've done for them, you know.
Jay, you eventually, and I mentioned earlier, you're pretty modest with your description of yourself, but you eventually went back to Iraq, didn't you?
I did. I got the opportunity to go back for about a week with other wounded veterans, about 9 of us, and all missing whatever parts of our bodies and all that stuff. And we got to go back and go visit the troops there at the time and go do these little town hall meetings and speeches. And it was very much, it was a good time. I'm very glad I had that opportunity to do that.
So it was Operation Proper Exit, and you guys went back to talk to the other wounded veterans, correct?
Veterans, not we were the wounded veterans going to see the troops over there serving in country at the time. Yeah.
So in Operation Proper Exit, you went back to where kind of the area where you were wounded.
Yeah.
Where you got
Yeah,
blown up.
that's right. That's right. So each of us had the opportunity to, we would tell the pilots, because that's how we traveled everywhere, was in the helicopters. And we'd tell the pilots, like, all right, this is exactly the spot where we got blown up. So they would fly over that spot and, kind of do a circle. And then we can kind of look down and be like, yep, there it is right there. That's where it happened, And I mean, it was a fun experience.
How'd that feel for you to be able to go back there? Did that give you any peace or closure, or?
That was the main point of that trip for us, was like, because if you think about it, we didn't get a transition from war to home and home back to back to not being in the military anymore. We just went from war to not being in the military anymore. There wasn't like that transitional type period where you get a redeployment back and get to see this, have the celebrations and all that. So we went from one craziness to another with nothing in between. And doing that, having that experience, going back over there, seeing where it actually happened and talking with the troops and how the status of the country was after the fact, like, yes, it did give some closure and it felt really good.
Awesome. So you spent a long time in the military. You're part of a military family. You were always part of something that was bigger than yourself. And then one day, boom, that mission's over. And so now life has forced you into this season of change, and your purpose became different. And maybe you didn't feel like you had a purpose initially, but how did you figure out what your new mission was, and how did it make you move forward?
Well, when I got back after I medically retired, I really had no idea at that time. I was in that transitional period of like, what am I going to do now? So, but I put myself back into college and tried to do that for about a year. And just like most people that get out of an environment like that, veterans, we go back to trying to finding that tribe again, that community again, being around other veterans. And fortunately, where I lived was a very kind of veteran heavy location. And so I got to know like veterans in the area and became part of like the VFWs and other little veteran organizations, and got to do things with them, and just kind of things kind of fell into place doing that stuff, getting to know the community outside of being in the military. From that, like I got to work for other veteran businesses. I became a DoD contractor where I was still working for the military, just not in the military. But doing that gave me a sense of purpose. I can give back to the people still in the fight, and help them when they get out. Just trying to, because that's that period of being in the getting out, that veteran transition period is always a tough one for most everyone that gets out, especially if they don't have a plan.
Yeah. Jay, I've been friends with you for a long time now, and I've told you this before, and I still feel this way today. If you look in the dictionary under the word resilience, you would find a picture of Jay Fain there. And I stand on that, and I truly believe that. Do you think, we talk a lot about resilience at Iron and Intention. Do you think that resilience is something that we're born with, or do you think it's something that we develop through intentional habits?
I think early on in life, we learn, we all are resilient in some way, shape, or form, especially as children. Because as children, we don't know anything, really. We're at the hands of who's raising us, and then things happen, and like we don't understand the world. Our parents or whomever is our guide at the time are teaching us how to be, they're teaching us how to survive in this world once we're away from the home, and we learn a lot about resilience during those times, And fortunately, I had great parents that, one was an immigrant from South Korea. My dad was a military man that's been all over and dealt with a lot of things. And through their combined shared experiences, they taught my sister and I, how to be as a person, a good human after we leave them, And there's a lot to learn from all that, especially as you get into your adulthood and you start becoming the father or the mother. You start becoming a husband or a wife. You start becoming a leader in your organization, or you start dealing with, because life happens to everyone, every single person in this world. Life happens to that, and what that is to them, whether it's they suffer all these traumatic experiences or they have to do whatever, like life happens. Life is going to happen, guaranteed, for everyone out there, and suffer. And there's a lot of things nowadays in this world that we can perceive as traumatic type experiences. It's the whole not living as a victim, your whole life. Because I'll just from my experience dealing with the things I've dealt with, could I just sit there and just complain and be a victim and woe is me all the time and be well within my right to? Sure. No one's going to tell me anything. No one's going to, fight me against that. No one's going to combat me against that. But why? Why do I want to live that way? Like, why would I want to be that type of person, Because my life was almost or was pretty much taken away from me. And I still have that life now. I'm thankful for that. And now I have a wife. I got 2 teenage boys, dogs. I got a house. I got all these things I see every day that I'm like, you know what? I could have almost not had any of this. Why would I want to be so negative every day? Who's that going to help? It's not going to help me. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help my family. It's not going to help anybody. So resilience, being resilient is such a key word for not just what I've personally experienced, but just for anything anyone can experience at any time in their life, and they have to figure out what that means to them personally. They can they can read the definitions, they can hear all these stories, all these people, how they did it, and they can take something from all that and learn and apply it within themselves. But it's up to them to get through that themselves. It's the whole, I can show you the door, but I can't open it for you type thing,
So Jay, you've obviously rebuilt your life after life served you a big old bucket of lemons. and man, I will tell you, you're so inspirational to me and to a lot of other folks that you have no idea you inspire. And so I'm asking this for a friend, but I'm asking it for me. If you could give somebody, me, one of our viewers, one piece of advice about rebuilding their life after something catastrophic happens to them, or after, they find themselves newly single, or, going through divorce or medical, just pick something bad and put it in there. What advice would you give them about rebuilding their life?
Never forget who they are, really. Because especially as us as adults that's already been through some, a lot of things in life already. Remember who they are. Remember who you are. Don't forget that person. Don't let that event define your character and dictate how you're going to feel every day. Deal with it accordingly, whatever it is. Get through it, but always remember who you are. And remember that I always say this to people that has reached out. I can't tell you that it's going to be easy, but it gets easier. Just never give up on that.
So the title of our podcast today is What Happens When the Person you can no longer be. Let me start that over. What happens when the person you were can no longer be the person you are? And I think, Jay, you face that. And I think you show that the answer isn't that you have to find your way back to that person you were. I think the answer is that you have to find your way back to recreating the new you and the even more improved you, the person that's going to give of themselves, take care of their family, take care of their community. I certainly see that with you, Jay. Do you think that's really what people need to do?
Yeah, definitely. If they're at the point where they have to recreate themselves and not live in that trauma that they may have been living in for a long time. Yeah, recreate themselves. Remember that person you are, like the one that shows compassion, that shows love, that is very, very humble.
Well, Jay, you've certainly taken an experience that could have defined the rest of your life, and instead you continue to serve and to grow and to connect people and help others. And so I'm very thankful for that. What you do is really at the heart of Iron and Intention. We don't always control the circumstances that shape us, but we choose what we do with those circumstances. Jay, thank you for your service, and thank you for being here on the Iron and Intention podcast.
Thanks for having me, Tommy.
Jay, thanks for sharing your story. I know some of the parts aren't always easy for you to talk about and to relive, but most importantly, your continuance to serve other folks long after you took that uniform off. And it's not just the folks that are immediately around you. You serve people on a national stage and really kind of an international stage. So I just want to encourage our listeners, if you're listening to this episode and you're going through something right now, remember this: you don't have to have your entire life figured out right now. You don't have to know exactly what comes next. Jay has shown us that he didn't know what was going to come next. Despite his life changing catastrophically, he was able to take the steps. And that first step was getting up the next day and getting moving. He also talked about finding his people, finding his tribe. And I think that is a great way to put it. And that is great advice. Find the people that can help you and ask for help. Take care of your body, take care of your mind, find something worth moving towards. And that's what Jay's done. Jay and his wife, Kayla, are helping others from youth to veterans to the police department and just the entire regional, state, and national community. And I will tell you, those two live with intention. They're both very inspirational. Please tell Kayla she's next. I'm going to have to get her on here too. For our listeners, thank you for joining us. I'm Tommy Wright, and this is Iron and Intention. Until next time, be strong, be intentional, and keep moving forward.